Welcome to Showbiz Fix Uncut, sponsored by Sun Bingo, where we unpack the biggest entertainment stories with the journalists that know all the juicy details. I'm Felicity Cross, and this week we're talking about two of Britain's biggest exports, Charli XCX and beef. From Taylor Swift to Lorde, Charli seems to have gotten into more public feuds than most. So does Charli XCX love beef, or does beef just love her? To help me unpack, I'm joined by Associate Bizarre Editor and Ultimate Brat, Hal Davies.
What did you call me?
Right, well, it's lucky that I'm not a vegan because there's going to be a lot of beef chat today.
There already has been.
Well, I know. So, Charli XCX, Queen of Beef. But how did she get there? The woman that she is now, why is she involved in all of this drama? I want to unpack it all today.
Yes, for sure. I mean, it's quite funny that she's got this reputation now because for a long time, it felt like Charli just wasn't that person at all. You know, she started off through MySpace, and when she released her first album, True Romance, it really actually didn't do much. Like, it was quite quiet. It was quite, you know, it wasn't a big album. It wasn't like she was headlining festivals or anything. And actually, you know, she had some big hits early on in her career. You know, she co-wrote I Love It for Icona Pop, and she had Boom Clap. You know, there was some songs that were big, but it wasn't until, you know, almost a decade after she started that she finally kind of hit the mainstream, hit the big time. And then all of these sort of feuds have like emerged since then, really.
What do you mean that she started on MySpace? I didn't know this.
Yeah, I mean, so she started, I mean, it was that time, right, in the early 2010s when we were all on MySpace, if you were of that age.
With the top nine.
With the top nine, and you'd be able to put, you know, songs on your profile. So that's where she'd started out. And, you know, it was like where Lily Allen started, for example, as well, you know. She would start out there, you know, she put her music on MySpace. You sort of made friends with different people who were doing the same thing. And sort of, I think the story goes that it was a MSN screen name, Charli XCX, you know, because you used to put XCX and little hearts and whatever.
Yeah.
And that is supposedly how she got her stage name.
What was your MSN name?
I think mine was really boring. I think I used to just have like Howl, and then I'd have like some emojis, and then I'd put, you know, some squiggles and like some emo song lyric or something. You know, you used to have a really long one. I think I just had all of that going.
Mine was always an emo song lyric.
Yeah, I mean, love it. Whatever song I was listening to that week, which was just like really probably a cause for concern, the lyrics in those songs. But, you know, I was having a great time.
Okay, so let's fast forward to the Charli that sort of has really made it big. So it felt like 2024, didn't it? Brat Summer, all of that kind of thing. Bring us up to date with that.
Yeah, so Brat was, you know, first sort of introduced to fans as the iconic, well, now iconic, green cover, which was, so it's just a green square with the word Brat written across it. And she dropped this album cover online, and people were like, what on earth is this?
Because it was giving MySpace, wasn't it? It was like, you know, MSN Paint.
Bearing in mind her album before Crash, which had gone to #1, she'd been in a bikini on the front of a car looking very sexy and like covered in blood, and it was all like crazy and sexy shoot. For her to go from that to a green square, everyone was like, what is this? Is this a placeholder album cover? And she was like, no, this is the album cover. And everyone was like, okay, well, this is going to be a flop. You know, people...
Yeah, where is the budget?
Well, and she said afterwards that she was like, well, I wanted to have a big budget for the first music video. And so I thought, well, I'll save a few quid on the album artwork because that'll cost a few grand. So that's how I'll do it. Little did anyone, I think, know that this album would become this sort of really culturally significant record that would go on to sort of make her name across the world.
Yeah, no, absolutely. But obviously with that album came the beef.
Yes.
That felt like when she set up stall in the butcher shop.
And I think the trouble was, you know, up to that point, Charli had like really gained this really keen, very eager and protective fan base, but it was a relatively small fan base. You know, she wasn't doing arenas. She was doing smaller venues, and people loved her. And as I say, Crash had gone to #1 a few years before, but it wasn't like she had loads of songs in the charts, and that album did not stick around in the top 10 for a long time. It was, you know, there's a core group of fans who would really stick by her, but it wasn't mass appeal. So I think when it came to writing Brat, she sort of said, you know, I'm going to throw the rule book out the window. I'm going to write the album I want to write. I'm not going to sort of appeal to other people's tastes and what other people think I should be doing. But at the same time, I think she thought, I'm just going to put exactly how I feel in this record. And because really the other albums hadn't had much scrutiny on them, there was no way she was expecting people to dissect the lyrics of these tracks in the way that they eventually did. So I think, she wrote about these things, probably a bit tongue-in-cheek, a bit cheeky, thinking, I'll be able to get away with these lyrical references and stuff. And then the album comes out, it becomes massive. And suddenly, there's a magnifying glass on every lyric on this record, and everyone's saying, well, I think I know who this is about.
Yeah, no, absolutely. So before we get into the specific cuts of beef, you've known Charli since the beginning of your career, right?
Yeah, I mean, I am actually, as you say, Chief Brat. I am a big Charli fan. So I loved her debut album, True Romance. And I can remember I was gutted because she cancelled her headline tour for that to work on her second album. And then I met her for the first time in 2014 at a festival called Great Escape. And then in the years that followed, that was like sort of when I started as a showbiz journalist. I'd meet her a lot. I interviewed her a lot in the early days.
In tiny little clubs.
I saw her in all sorts of different venues. I saw her in like the Jazz Cafe in Camden once, which is absolutely tiny, and it was a crazy show. And then I saw her at the Village Underground, which I know you got married at the Village Underground.
I
so
did.
It's not a huge venue.
No.
I saw her sort of all over. Sorry. But I saw her sort of all over, and it's been really interesting to see, how her career has changed in that way. And it is an interesting one, just in the sort of unconventional path she's taken,
Yeah. So is she a instigator, or do you think she's just reactive?
Look, I think Charli is a complex character. I think she sometimes loves to be braggadocious and say that she's the best artist ever, but also she's a very insecure person at the same time. And she would admit that, you can tell from the lyrics of Brat alone that, sometimes she's very insecure and she's, very self-critical. And so I think maybe she's doesn't mean to be the instigator, but she ends up being the instigator because sometimes she just loves to be a little bit messy. Don't we all?
Okay,
I think that is it.
Okay, so let's talk about Lorde.
Yes. So Lorde, I think, is the first one that really pops out from Brat. So Charli releases this song called Girl So Confusing, which is on Brat. And the story goes that actually Charli had voice noted Ella, Lorde, the day before the album comes out and says, look, this album's going to be out in a few hours. People are going to guess that this song is about you. It's about you. This is how I wrote it. She said this. Actually, little did Charli know that Lorde was back home in New Zealand. The album had already dropped because of the time difference. She'd already heard it and been like, well, I know who this is about.
Oh, no.
But that was really interesting because the lyrics on that song, it is that sort of thing. It could have gone really two ways. So the lyrics are, can be quite brutal. In some ways, she's saying, people say we're alike. We talk about making music, but I don't know if it's honest. Can't tell if you want to see me falling over and failing. So it's sort of being like, where do I stand with you? Like, I don't know what you're about. And, she says, sometimes I think you might hate me. Sometimes I think I might hate you. Maybe you just want to be me. And so it's this whole sort of like confused mindset. But the good thing for Charli was that this song came out, the fans that were thinking, oh my God, this is going to cause World War III between these girls. It's all going to pop off. And Lorde actually ended up being really the bigger person in the situation and was like, hey, actually, I understand where you're coming from. And she did this verse on the remix, which ended up being a really successful song, And actually, the interesting thing was that Charli and Lorde had been compared their whole career.
Yeah, because wasn't there an interview in 2014 where someone called Charli Lorde?
Yeah, so there was an interview. It was like backstage at a music festival or something. I think it was in Germany, and the the interviewer goes, "Well, I love your song Royals."
Oh.
And Charli goes, "Yeah. It's about." It's about this and that. And, she plays along with it, pretending to be Lorde at this point.
Because obviously Royals is Lorde's song.
Royals is Lorde's song. And they had similar hair. And that's what they sing about in the song.
Yeah.
So anyway, once it comes to this remix, then Charli, invites Lorde to be part of it. Lorde apparently writes her verse really quickly, a sort of 24-hour period. I've always compared myself to you because it always seems like you're having a great time. And I felt, insignificant. And I had no idea that you would be feeling that way about me. And so it's actually like an amazing story of girlhood that this song, which really kind of, there was clearly bubbling tensions before this song came out. That's where the song got written from, was this place of like, actually, we're really not getting along. And people, I don't think, really knew that there was this beef beforehand. No. But it turned out that this song really brought them together. And actually very sweetly now, they've done quite a lot of shows together where, every now and again they'll pop out at each other's concerts to do the song. So it's nice that actually this was actually one which stopped the beef. It ended the beef.
We love that. A proper pop reconciliation.
Exactly that.
Well, there we go. Okay, brilliant. Taylor Swift, though, things not as well in that camp.
I think it's kind of like the complete polar opposite of that situation, basically. Because, part of the thing on Girl So Confusing was her sort of admitting, her insecurities and, how she wasn't sure about how someone felt. She wasn't sure where her position was. And so then there was another song on Brat called Sympathy is a Knife. And on that one too, Charli is sort of saying, there's this girl who's a female pop star. She doesn't name Taylor, as she didn't name Lorde as well, but, people figure these things out. The lyrics are very obvious. She says, that this one girl taps my insecurities. She's saying, I could never be her. I could never do what she does. I'm the complete opposite of her. And it's sort of Charli saying, I'm like, I compare myself to her, but I could never be that girl, and it's, in some ways it's about jealousy, right? Of being a pop star.
But didn't Charli open up for Taylor back in the day?
Yes. So this was the backstory, was that Charli and Taylor had sort of been friendly for a while. Charli had been the support act on the European leg of the Reputation tour. All seemed fine, but it was at a time when Charli was really doing something else with her music. She was going on stage at these Reputation tour, sets and singing Boom Clap and these songs. At the same time, she was doing these underground shows for her Pop 2 record, which was really completely different. Then Charli gave an interview shortly after the tour ended, and she said, I don't want to ever be a support act again. That tour made me realize I don't want to do that, which the fans, the Swifties, picked up on and said, wow, that's really horrible. And Charli then had to come out, do this statement, I'm really sorry. I didn't mean that, no shade to Taylor. So I think that's where it first started.
Okay, well, look, she was directly being compared to Taylor because they were on the very same stage, weren't they? So I kind of get where the root of the insecurity came from.
Exactly. And, you're female artists in a pop landscape. There's not really a lot of people doing the same thing at that point.
Yeah.
But also there's the link, which is that at that time, Taylor was dating Matty Healy.
Oh, it always comes back to Matty Healy, doesn't it?
It always does. So Taylor's dating Matty Healy and Charli is dating George Daniel, who is the drummer in 1975.
Okay.
And Matty Healy is the singer in the 1975.
So now we're in 2023?
Yeah, so it's around 2023, 2024. And there's a lyric in the song which says, don't want to see you backstage at my boyfriend's show.
Oh.
Fingers crossed behind my back. I hope they break up. So that was the lyric, I think, that really felt like a dig, because it was saying, I think it can be interpreted in the fact that, like, I don't want you around me. I don't want you dating my friend, But I think she meant it as in like a way of, if we're close like that, we're going to get compared even more and I feel inferior to you, So I think it's interesting how you can interpret that song in different ways. But I think that was how I took what Charli meant when she was singing those lyrics anyway. But that's not quite how Taylor took it. Is that fair to say?
Well, look, I'm a Swiftie, but like you say, I think this is one of those situations where it's the recollections may vary. Readings of these lyrics certainly did vary. So I think that Taylor perhaps was in her right to take it how she took it.
But firstly, I mean, I think...
Is that really... am I sitting on the fence here?
I think that's fine. I mean... It is a grey area. I think you can interpret it in different ways. But I think people really realised that Taylor had taken this personally literally days after Brat came out, because the midweek charts came out in the UK and it said, Charli's numbers are great. It looks like she's going to have a #1 album with Brat. And everyone said, hooray, how exciting for Charli. She's going to have a #1 album.
Her first #1 album.
It wasn't her first #1 album, but, it was a big moment in her career. I think it would have been her second #1 album. So, big moment for her. Anyway, just before Friday, just before sales closed, Taylor Swift goes online and she says, I'm going to release a UK-only digital variant of my Tortured Poets Department album.
Taylor and the variants.
So she released this variant. Obviously, the Swifties go wild, download it off iTunes. It leapfrogs Brat, stops Brat from going to number one.
Oh.
And that feels like an act of war, really, in music, doesn't it? If you do that, it felt very targeted. It did not feel like a coincidence that those two things happened in the same week.
Shall I get off the fence? Okay, yeah, that's not a kind of reading of the situations may vary.
It did feel, I mean, look,
it's strategic,
people
right?
close to Taylor will insist, oh, it was completely random. She just wanted to have a week at number one. She didn't think about who was, out at the same time.
Because I guess it's fair to say that anyone in the charts pretty much every week of the year could feel like Taylor was, targeting them to prevent them getting to number one. I think there was a few occasions where this happened, wasn't there? Just because she had so many variants.
But yeah, it was that question of, well, why do you feel the need to do this?
Fine. Okay. So Taylor then took the opportunity to hit back with some lyrics that were deemed to be about Charli.
I mean, yeah. And this is one where it's actually quite funny because I've spoken to people close to Taylor who say, well, how do you know this song's about Charli? It might be about anyone. Some people have suggested it be about someone else. Well, these lyrics, I think...
So really, this is Actually Romantic.
There's a song called Actually Romantic, yes. So it was on the Life of a Showgirl album, which comes out a year after Brat comes out. And, there are some, interestingly, on Life of a Showgirl, there are a few different songs where people were like, wow, that's clearly about this. And, people always dissect Taylor's albums in that way, don't they?
Like the one that was about Travis Kelce's manhood.
Well, yes, Wood, or whatever that was called. Yeah, when she talked about his pinewood tree or whatever it was. Yeah.
Taylor's poetry has left the building.
Yeah.
Love you, Taylor.
Well, you are actually a big Swiftie.
Well, yeah,
so.
yeah.
But so the lyrics on Actually Romantic, and you have to remember, that there was a song on Charli's Brat album about, with a similar title. So that's what this is a reference to. Mm-hmm. And anyway, so the lyrics on Actually Romantic are, high five my ex, and then you said you're glad he ghosted me. Which is obviously a reference to Matty Healy. He's back again.
Yes.
Wrote me a song saying it makes you sick to see my face. Some people might be offended, but it's precious, adorable, like a toy chihuahua barking at me from a tiny purse. That's how much it hurts. How many times has your boyfriend said, why are we always talking about her? So, I mean, that's a brutal blow, isn't it? That's really saying, I'm sticking the knife in here.
Yeah.
And, I think that's kind of an interesting interpretation of the lyrics to say, that she wrote a song saying it makes you sick to see my face. I mean, I don't think she really meant it like that. She just said, I'll compare myself to you if you're around me. Mm. But obviously these lyrics are pretty full on, pretty savage.
So we're probably not going to see that hopping on each other's tracks like we did with Lorde and Charli.
Yeah, so I think this became quite clear. Do you know what? There was a rumor though, which I never got confirmed, but I think might have something to it, that when Charli did her Brat remix album, apparently at one point there was a discussion with Taylor about doing something on that record.
Yeah.
And then nothing came to fruition. So, look, who knows if that was true or not.
I would love to have been in a room when that conversation went on.
I really wonder because, I wonder really whether that was the thing of like, maybe we can do this, otherwise the friendship's over and there's no coming back. And obviously, Taylor's really gone in on this song. So it was pretty brutal.
I mean, popping my Swiftie hat aside, I think it's fair to say that Taylor has had beef of her own with a lot of people. So arguably, maybe Charli's not the beefy lady in this one.
Yeah, I mean, but then also we're talking about Charli's beef, aren't we? So, they've both had run-ins. I think when you're, someone who's at the top of your game, there's going to be people who don't like you and you're going to end up having some disagreements, which I think's inevitable, but it's really quite harsh. And actually, the interesting thing was that when Actually Romantic dropped, the week that The Life of a Showgirl came out, Charli was actually in the studio in Paris that same week. So there was a lot of people saying, look, is Charli now going to write another song back? And so it was very interesting. She just released her album a few weeks ago called Music, Fashion, Film, which was the album she was working on at that very time in that week. And look, you can go through that album however you want, but I don't think really there's anything there that can be interpreted as a diss towards Taylor. And I'm not surprised because I think Charli would probably think, look, I never meant for that to blow up in that way in the first place.
Yeah.
And I especially do not want to stoke the ashes of this feud because, Taylor's an all-powerful machine and you don't want to have that. And, now it's quite sad that, when you post about Charli online on socials, there's a big row between the Angels, the Brats, and the Swifties because, there's just the beef has spread to those.
Yeah, the fandoms. We've covered the two biggest slabs of beef for Charli, but there are others.
There are.
Yes. So what happened with Marina and the Diamonds?
So this is kind of the most hilariously camp feud of all.
Okay. We like a fun one.
This is a fun one. In 2015, Marina releases this album called Fruit. And she does this photo shoot for the cover, which is kind of dark and she's got fruit all around her. The following year, this is camp. Charli does a campaign for Impulse fragrances. Different time for Charli. She wouldn't be doing that now.
I was going to say.
Anyway, in the photo shoot promoting that, she has this fruit around her and it's all sort of a familiar vibe.
Yeah.
And Marina then goes on Twitter and she posts familiar fruit. And that's now become this sort of camp meme online about, well, this looks like familiar fruit, So it's very funny. I think they did make up afterwards, but it was kind of this really clear shade of like, don't steal my ideas, So that was a funny one. But yeah, as you say, it's not her first feud. I feel like we need to get through a few of them because there are a few different ones.
Mm-hmm.
There was then Rina Sawayama, who had supported Charli on tour before. And then in 2022, they did the song Beg For You, which was a single from Charli's Crash album. They collaborated on that. I went to the launch party where Rina jumped up on stage with her and they performed it. Anyway, then a short while later, Rina Sawayama goes on stage at Glastonbury and badmouths your favourite, Matty Healy,
no.
who's in charge of her record label at that time, or involved in her record label.
Right.
Badmouths him over some comments that he'd made on a podcast, which were quite unsavoury. Shortly afterwards, Charli unfollows her online. All hell breaks loose. The fans don't know what's going on. And then it prompts Charli to have to come out and say, we had a personal disagreement. We've made up on the phone. But, it was like, wow, not another feud. But then Charli's back on Twitter again. In 2023, there's another one with FKA Twigs. So this was one where Charli just randomly tweeted one day saying, don't ever be fake to me at a party or in the street again. I know what you say about me behind my back. And people are like, wait, what? Who's this about? People were putting, two and two together, saw that they're not following each other, had sort of been friendly before. And then the lyrics on Von Dutch, also on Brat, it became clear that maybe this was about Twigs too.
Is that because of Matty Healy again?
Well, that could be a suggestion, hey.
Look, I do not have any personal beef with Matty Healy, but I do feel like he turns up in a lot of these conversations that we have.
He does, because obviously FK Twigs and Matty Healy had also dated around that point.
Yes.
Split up. But the lyrics on Von Dutch, it's okay to just admit that you're jealous of me. I heard you talk about me. That's the word on the street, which, clearly isn't a reference to what she'd said in her tweet before about this person talking about her behind her back.
Okay, fine. Do we feel like part of the reason she gets involved in all of this is her defending Matty?
Hey, I do think that maybe that is part of it.
Has
Charli...
Matty got her on the payroll?
Well, Charli has since got married to George, the drummer from 1975, right?
Yeah.
So they're very close. They'd also, toured together before. They'd spent time together. I think she sort of does feel like a kinship with Matty Healy. Mm-hmm. But it's quite interesting. In interviews more recently, she has sort of said, he's a bit like an annoying brother to her. They really like drive each other up the wall sometimes. I think that would make sense because I think Charli would be like, what are you doing dating Taylor? This is going to cause issues to me. Why have you said this on a podcast? This is going to cause issues to me.
Can we not?
Yeah.
But then there was Green Day at Coachella.
This was a fun one, I think. So look, Brat had this huge moment. She'd been, at the top of her game. She'd done this amazing tour. And she gets booked for both Coachella and Glastonbury the following year. Mm-hmm. People sort of said she should be headlining Glastonbury, and she didn't. She headlined the other stage, which is the second biggest stage. So, it's a good slot, but she wasn't headlining. And I think she maybe didn't give her all of... She didn't bring any special guests out and stuff, I think, because she knew, well, I'm not headlining, so I don't need to. But also at Coachella, it was the same. She was the second act on before the headliner, Green Day. And she came on with a sash, which said, Miss should be headline. Which, look... I think you can argue at that point, Kamala Harris had used her in her election campaign. She'd had this huge cultural moment. and look, props to Green Day, been around for ages, great. But they weren't having the sort of, moment that Charli was having.
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
So I think she was being a bit tongue-in-cheek, but also being a bit like, well, there's some truth in this,
Yeah.
They laughed it off and came on with their own fake sash and a Brat hat and stuff. So it was fine in the end. But I think people were, I think if you don't know Charli and you don't get Charli, maybe you'd think, that's actually really rude. That's, not on.
Yeah.
I think she thought of it more of a joke. But yeah, people weren't very happy with her for that.
Fair enough. Okay, so I'm going to bring you back to our original question. Does Charli love beef or does beef love Charli?
I think Charli really does love a bit of a feud. She loves being a bit messy. I think that is the thing. When she released Brat, she had no idea that, these feuds were going to pop off in this way and that there was going to be the same, microscope over everything. So I think it took her aback a bit. I think nowadays she'll be way more careful. It is very noticeable that on Music Fashion Film, there's no lyrics that are as messy as the ones that are on Brat. So I think she realizes, I've been burned by that. That's like a hard toll to take when you have those moments on social media where everyone's going mad at you.
Yeah.
Especially the Swifties, right? So I think she loved the beef, and I feel like now she's cutting down. She's more of a vegetarian these days.
She does vegan Mondays.
Yeah, I think she does vegan Mondays. Do you know what? She's still going to have a bit of a steak. She's still going to go to Flatiron occasionally.
Yeah.
But I think, she's going green.
I love this. What I would ask, though, is does her music need this drama?
I think, look, Charli's music and why Brat worked is because it was so deeply personal. And it was just her, like almost her diary that she, put out there. And I think for that album to be as big as it was, you sort of needed all of that in there because it was a snapshot of being a woman in your early 30s in the music industry in the early 2020s. So I think it was important for that. But I think, she's made it clear she doesn't want to repeat Brat. She doesn't want to do the same thing again. And I think it might be a while until we have a diss track for sure from her. I think she's learned her lesson there. And I think also now she feels the heat a bit more. I think she doesn't go off on Twitter in the same way that she used to,
She's dropped one of the X's from Charli XCX.
Yeah, she still likes posting a few bits on socials, but I guess she's going to be less messy with it as she goes forward.
The other thing that I'm thinking as we sit here and chat about this is, would we even be having this conversation if it was a man?
Hey, I would actually like to think so because, I guess, we've had Drake and Kendrick. That was like one of the biggest feuds in music of the last 10 years. And that was all about trading, these disses. But the sad thing is that those songs were diss tracks. And I still will say that I don't think any songs off Brat were diss tracks. I think they were her, saying how she felt, and she felt insecure around these people or was like unsure about where she stood. And it was basically a discussion of how, wow, it's hard to be a woman, and not know where you stand and compare yourself to people and jealousy and envy. So
it's just the fans that like comparing women.
And then how you interpret the songs, right?
Yeah. That's your dose of Showbiz Fix Uncut for this week, brought to you by Sun Bingo. Remember to subscribe to us here on the Sun Showbiz YouTube channel for all the inside TV and celebrity gossip. See you next week.